as we reached the midpoint of the 2000s, the Sonic series was a few years into something that at that time could still be optimistically described as a rough patch. From the moment Sega discontinued the Dreamcast and went third party, mainstream gaming seemed to start losing patience and interest with the blue blur. Sonic, and Sega along with him, was quickly painted as the deserved loser of the console wars. Now, we in the fandom did our best to defend the series, but it was a thankless, difficult task, especially when we couldn't deny that it was declining in quality and consistency, even as the game somehow continued to sell extremely well. This widening gap between the commercial success of the series and its critical reception was something that not even Sonic was going to be able to outrun forever. We might not have had the name yet, but this was the origin of the Sonic cycle. So in this gloomy climate of early '05, Sonic really needed a win. And it looked like he was going to get one. The series was going to be honored as one of the inaugural inductees at the new Walk of Game exhibit in San Francisco, California. You might have seen this video from Jim's collection, but it was actually made for the occasion, and it lifted that cloud and the spirits of the fandom, even if just for a moment. It was nice to see something that celebrated the importance, the success, and the legacy of the series. You know, maybe it had been a rough couple of years, but Sonic had been such a phenomenon, and he could be again. After all, this was one of the greatest icons of the industry, and hopefully Sega was gonna get him back on track. So, that thing before the intro was not a dramatization. At the very event where their mascot was honored as one of gaming's first ballot icons, Sega decided it would be a good look to shoot down that legacy and announce, this. My first thought, and the first thought of a lot of Sonic fans, was denial. I mean, a Sonic character packing heat looked way too stupid to be anything but an early April Fool's joke. Gaming was in the middle of that awkward adolescence, where anything family-friendly was shunned, see the ridiculous vitriol aimed at the GameCube in general and Wind Waker in particular, whereas the PS2 and especially the Xbox were characterized by mature, realistic games for real gamers. Shadow looked for all the world like a parody of the trend. And if it was real, who in the world was this supposed to be for? As much as we might not have liked it, we knew the answer even then. In the ultimate insult, the game that was going to make the franchise darker and edgier and more quote-unquote mature was targeted at the one group that was still young enough that they would be self-conscious about that. There was a reason these critically panned games kept selling well, and it wasn't because people our age were buying them. The people begging Sega to bring back Shadow were the ones who'd never played a Sonic game before. No, not that one. They didn't have a Dreamcast. Ah, yeah, there it is. That one. Shadow was the favorite character of the younger generation, and to appeal to them, he would star in a game that appeared on the surface to go squarely against the things that had made anyone else a fan of the series. Brooding, mysterious, story-focused, with a gun. It's kind of ironic in retrospect that us OG fans got so riled up about this blatant pandering to the trends, because that's exactly what the games we'd grown up loving were also accused of. Sonic was conceived to appeal to early 90s chewed, and now Shadow was the same thing for the next generation. I should probably clarify here, I'm not saying that nobody over the age of like 10 could have possibly appreciated this character. Plenty of teens and even a few curmudgeonly 20-somethings who were basically the elder statesmen of the fan base in 2005. Plenty of older fans enjoyed Sonic Adventure 2's story and characterization. I mean, of course they did. They were the generation that made Sad AM the central focus of the fandom for half a decade. But they tended to appreciate this character for different reasons. Shadow sacrificing himself like this was unprecedented in this series. And that conclusion to what was a fairly well-developed arc made for an interesting, nuanced character. But the younger demographic didn't just enjoy the arc, they loved Shadow, and often considered him their favorite character. This resulted in a split between what older fans generally appreciated about Shadow, and how his return might cheapen that, versus what younger fans generally wanted to see, namely for their favorite red and black renegade to be brought back from the dead. And as much teeth gnashing as we were doing about that at the time, with perspective I am very thankful you guys were there, and I'm glad the series was still making new fans. I get it, but I mean, come on. You guys really thought this doofus was cooler than Sonic? Well, here's my opinion. May not be a popular one, but I'm gonna give it to you straight. I think that Shadow the Hedgehog kinda sucks. Oh, I don't mean that. That would be a popular opinion. But no, I mean this. I mean him. Right from his very first appearance, this derivative dipstick didn't do a thing for me. I didn't hate him. I didn't like him. I just didn't care. From his stoic demeanor to his tortured backstory to his design, I just thought Shadow was boring. The Sonic series established a precedent of introducing new characters based mostly on animals that nobody had ever heard of, and giving them superpowers that they never actually have. Hedgehogs can't run on water, foxes can't fly, echidnas don't glide, and, snipers don't cackle? So why would you introduce a second hedgehog, on the 10th anniversary no less, and make him play exactly like the main character? Especially in a series that already featured both an extremely popular nemesis who was Sonic's temperamental opposite, and a robot duplicate who could match his every move. But that contrast between light and dark was the whole point of Sonic Adventure 2, and the idea may have worked if Shadow's origin or personality was in any way tied to Sonic's, if he had really been a dark reflection of the hero. But despite their similar designs and abilities, Shadow's origin has absolutely nothing to do with Sonic. Shadow was a Shadow in name only, and yet his tragic backstory and ultimate redemption was at the center of Sonic Adventure 2, which just made it all the more disconnected from previous games in the series. I will cop to my perspective here, being in line with my preferences. I tend to relate to more fun, self-assured, lighthearted, or goofy protagonists, whereas I generally find brooding, angsty anti-heroes laughable at best and boring at worst. I like Goku more than Vegeta, Spider-Man more than Batman, Cloud in Final Fantasy VII more than Cloud since Final Fantasy VII. You get the point. My aversion to angst made the youth culture of the mid-2000s either the worst possible time I could have been a teenager, or the best. Being a brooding, angsty, miserable sad sack made you one of the cool kids in my high school. And as someone who was a loud, obnoxious, adolescent future YouTuber, I probably found that a lot more hilarious than I should have. But still, I was sick of being surrounded by it all the time. So of course that's when my favorite series brought out a game starring a brooding, angsty, miserable sad sack. But we in the fandom could take solace in one thing. At least Shadow was just a spin-off. It didn't really matter. It didn't really count as a real Sonic game. It was just a spin-off, right? No, I've babbled about things related to the game for long enough now. I don't think I should have to explain this. I mean, come on, it doesn't even have the word Sonic in the title. It's a spin-off, right? Right? Alright, strap in, here we go. Back at the apex of the Sonic boom, identifying a mainline title was simple. It was a platform action game, released on Sega's flagship hardware, developed by some iteration of Sonic Team, and starring Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, of course, other series would establish different precedents, but examples outside of Sonic shouldn't be applicable to it. So, take Knuckles Chaotix. Just like Shadow would do a decade later, Chaotix directly follows up with a story set in motion by the previous games. It is an action platformer, and what happens in it impacts later games in the mainline. However, it does not star Sonic the Hedgehog. That makes it a spin-off, just like Tails' Adventures and Mean Bean Machine and Christmas Nights. That's the lens I look through. And with a few necessary revisions over the years, this is still how I would define the mainline. And yet there seems to be a substantial contingent of people who balk at that idea. Like it's as obvious to them that Shadow is not a spin-off as it is to me that it is. How could they be so wrong? I don't know, maybe they're not. And who cares, it's all semantics anyway. We're just looking at it differently. It all comes back to that age-old question. What is a Sonic the Hedgehog game supposed to be? If you answer that question through the lens of the Genesis era, then duh, Shadow's a spin-off. But if you define a Sonic game by the conventions of the Adventure era, where story and character variety was emphasized, where Sonic's starring role was always alongside an ensemble, where you may well spend a bulk of your time with the game playing something that is not a speedy platformer, then there is a real case to be made that Shadow could be mainline. Especially since it was, after all, developed by Sonic Team. It'll still always be a spin-off to me, and we in the fandom at the time surely wished it was a parody. But this was no joke. That first visual of an emo cartoon character scowling and holding a gun was toxic to the game's reputation from the moment it was revealed. Long before it even came out, Shadow was seen as such a naked, misguided attempt to cash in on the trends of the time that it didn't really matter what the game was actually like. This was already all that people would ever see it as. You might say that Shadow's concept overshadowed anything else about it. It wouldn't be the last time that happened. But if what you see on the surface is such an easy target, what does this game offer beneath that? I'm qualified to ask this question because I genuinely don't know. The thing I'm most familiar with here is this wonderfully stupid intro and freaking bop of a theme song, with its delicious cornball lyrics and edgy guitar.
Can you see all of me? Walk into my mystery. Step inside and walk for dear life.
I love it! Man, when I said Shadow was the Vegeta to Sonic's Goku, I didn't mean it literally. But when it comes to the game itself, I've never gotten more than a level or two into it, and I haven't even tried in at least a decade. But maybe that speaks to why it made so little impact beyond, that. Maybe most people just don't make it much further than the intro, and I can see why. Because once you're past that, you get to Westopolis, and woo boy! The first level of Shadow's game is designed, intentionally and otherwise, as a sort of mirror universe counterpart of City Escape. Where City Escape was cheery and sunny, Westopolis is an apocalyptic hellscape. Where this song was upbeat and catchy, this one is crooked and destructive. And where City Escape was one of the most impactful, most memorable, most pitch-perfect first impressions in a series that's full of them, Westopolis is... well, it's perfectly indicative of what Shadow the Hedgehog is going to be. And that's not always a good thing. First things first though, let's talk about the basics. The controls, abilities, and general feel of moving your character are all light years ahead of Heroes. I know that's faint praise coming from me, but I'll go so far as to say that it feels more or less on par with Adventure 2, and even better in some ways. The jump arc is clear and controllable, the game is great at understanding where you want the homing attack to go, movement speed is good, the ledge stop mechanic is once again a lifesaver instead of a nuisance, even Heroes' specific mechanics like the triangle dive have been improved. I would say they got the basics right. This was, oddly enough, the first 3D game in the series where you only control a single character, so it would be pretty embarrassing to get that wrong. Now just to clarify, at its best it's only as good as Adventure 2, and seeing as this game is 4 years newer, even that's dubious. Come on, if the spin dash doesn't get you through loops, then why is it even here? Now more than ever, flinging your superpowered spiky hedgehog up slopes, off ledges, and through loops and valleys in the pursuit of speed isn't really the focus. Too boring. Too outdated. As old as the Green Hills. Ugh. No, the focus of Shadow the Hedgehog is
making those who mocked you, those who would stand in your way, suffer like the ignorant sheep they are by dispersing vigilante justice, the only way a true anarchist like Shadow the Hedgehog knows how.
By turning your foes into eggs with this stupid chicken gun from Billy Hatcher.
This is how Don Yoshi wants it done.
All anybody wants to talk about is the cartoon hedgehog that cocks an MP5 like it's a shotgun, and oh yeah, that's stupid. But most of the weapons available in this game make me wonder if Sonic Team really was in on the joke, because they seem to revel in that stupidity. Yeah, you've got your PP7s, and your SMGs, and your RPGs, and all that junk, but why would you want to use something like that when you could use this ridiculous alien laser cannon? Ooh, or you can jack a bazooka from an egg pond?
What? It's more Eggman's robots?
We're still calling him that? I'm trying to be nice here. Jack a bazooka from an Eggman's robots and turn the tables. Or you can take a feather from Lodi's playbook and whack him with a stop sign. Just make sure you don't forget to pick up extra swords to refill your sword ammo. The breadth and variety of the weapons you find throughout the game, and even some of the unconventional ways that they're used, really surprised me. It's one of the things I found most enjoyable about hitting new stages. It always seemed like they had something new to offer. It just goes to show this really is the same Sonic team that made Phantasy Star Online. It's too bad combat itself could still use some work. You can only hold one weapon at a time, and, that's fine. But at anything slower than a sprint, Shadow has to do this clunky little dropping animation. What's worse is that if you happen to be in a pickup hitbox when you drop a gun, you've got to get out of it before Shadow will pick anything up, and sometimes that results in you picking up what you just dropped again. While I still think the animation's a bit of a clunker, it is fortunately helped along by a dedicated button that will instantly swap Shadow's weapons. Unfortunately, I'm an absolute moron, and I didn't notice that until I'd played through the game half a dozen times. Kids, remember to read your instruction manual. Combat itself is better than Heroes, but it does suffer from some of the same issues. Enemies still have health bars, but I guess that's more justified if you're gonna have weapons. Most of the time, if you have a firearm, you can take down enemies in a snap. But I guess to incentivize you to use guns, Shadow's other options like the homing attack, as well as his new goofball melee combos, are functionally useless. Either way though, there's no real punch to anything. And speaking of which, I guess I spoke too soon. At least one thing in this game has punch. I said the models and heroes looked like plastic action figures, but don't worry, Sonic Team sees where they went wrong, so they've made Shadow out of rubber instead. Early on, I was constantly bursting out laughing at how silly this all looked.
Death to all who oppose me! The ultimate Stretch Armstrong!
The more realistic a game from this era tried to be, the worse it aged. And quite frankly, Shadow looks 2005 as heck. An ugly bloom filter is bleeding out of every light source, and the more realistic, darker settings contrast terribly with cartoony character models and doofy animations. Seriously, at one point the game told me to bust down a door, and this happened. It just doesn't fit. But hey, graphics aren't everything, and at least a lot of this stuff is so bad it's hilarious. With that in mind, the combat is passable, the variety of weapons is fun, and most importantly, the core gameplay is roughly as good as it's ever been in 3D. It sounds like enough elements are in place for this to be, at the very least, a pretty fun train wreck. So where's the problem? Oh, there it is. This is Shadow's progression map. It's this confounding mess of a thing before you even know what it means. But don't worry, once I explain it, you'll be even more confused. Each rectangle represents a level. These branch off from the left, meaning, that's right, most stages feature 3 possible goals. A hero path, a dark path, and a neutral path. Less than 30 seconds into the first level of Shadow's very own game, his momentum is brought to a complete stop for this.
Hey Shadow, long time no see.
Yeah, I don't know if a game starring Shadow really needed to have the series mascot hogging the limelight. Tails Adventure got it right. But okay, that's not the real problem. The real problem is what Sonic wants you to do.
Looks like these black creatures really mean business. Let's you and me show them a thing or two.
The real problem is this. Find and eliminate all 45 enemies in this level. Fortunately, to assist in this, you now have the ability to warp between checkpoints. So, +1 for that, but minus several million because there's no way to tell where enemies are. So if you happen to overlook even a single one, your only recourse is to start over from the beginning and look harder. Would it really have been so hard to at least give us an indication of which areas still have enemies? Or a radar? Or something? Maybe the dark path is more interesting. Oh no. This little hexapus is called Black Doom, and he wants you to do essentially the same thing, except now you'll eliminate all 35 gun soldiers in the level. Now, don't actually kill them whatever you do. Killing aliens, that's fine, screw those guys. But killing humans, that's gonna be a no-go. Just incapacitate them instead. We gotta hit that E10+ rating. Black-hearted evil, brave-hearted hero. Make your choice. But remember that either path is functionally the same thing. Just comb over every nook and cranny of the entire level, hunting down drones. It is at this point that anyone who likes having fun with video games might say, but what about that third path? What if I just want to keep it nice and simple, run through the level, and make it to the goal ring? And while that is indeed the least painful choice, here's the thing. The level design is not really built for that. It's not built like it's a Sonic level. On the contrary, Westopolis is a series of open space sets packed with enemies of either type, and Shadow's high movement speed makes weaving between them improbable at best. Just like the cartoony characters and animations are at odds with the plot and the setting, so too is the gameplay at odds with the game design. There are worse levels than this in Shadow the Hedgehog, and oh, is it ever gonna hurt when we get there. But Westopolis does make a terrible first impression in a game that really needed to put its best rocket shoe forward if it was gonna have any hope of outrunning this. Almost every level follows this same structure. 2 missions, each tied to a specific character, either of whom can become your partner and will tell you exactly what to do. And in most cases, it'll be some variation of finding X number of things, or killing Y number of enemies, or activating all the switches, You always know what stuff you need to find, but you never have an indication of where that stuff might be. Oh, and no matter who your partner is or what you're doing, anything that could be considered a threat will always hurt you. You can be the most heroic, virtuous Shadow imaginable, fighting for justice alongside Sonic himself. And gun soldiers will still shoot you on sight. If you defend yourself, Sonic screams at you to stop.
Stop! Stop that! Stop it. Hey, Shadow. I gotta ask you something.
At least we have the option to make Charmy shut up this time. Because of this, levels have to be designed with a more open structure, and often with backtracking in mind. And because of that, one of the most common criticisms of the adventure titles, and early 3D platformers in general, has gotten even worse. Shadow's gameplay is constantly hampered by its camera. It's like the developers decided the best way to fix this problem was just to make you fix it instead. It's almost entirely under manual control, and I found myself constantly fighting against it, nailed by stray projectiles fired by enemies I couldn't see. The adventure games both had this mercy mechanic that gave you some relief from their rough edges. After you took a hit, you could recover with a mid-air jump. And this was invaluable, because it gave you an opportunity to save yourself if you got knocked off a ledge. Shadow, despite being so much more combat-oriented, doesn't let you do that, making an edge that was already rough even more so, and leading to situations like this, where you're killed just because you're very slightly out of position. Oh, I guess I should talk about those meters at the top of the screen. They're ostensibly there to give the player's moral choices tangible gameplay consequences. In reality, they're so tacked on and forgettable that I wrote an entire draft of this script without remembering they existed. They're half-baked in their simplicity. If you kill good guys, whatever that happens to be on a particular stage, you charge up the red meter. When it's full, it automatically starts draining, but while it does, you gain invulnerability, infinite ammo, and the ability to blast out some of that charge on a destructive wave. It's pretty cool and situationally useful for sure, but it's hard to time what situation you'll be in when that meter tops out and you get to use it. However, kill the bad guys, and the blue meter fills up. This also gives you invincibility and infinite ammo, but now instead of doing a destructive wave, you can make the gameplay itself for a while, blowing right past mission-critical objectives without completing them. This thing is just a liability. The button that activates it is the same button that drops guns, meaning you might just, say, accidentally fly into the gold ring, which would be very unfortunate if, hypothetically, you had just spent 9 minutes agonizingly trying to complete that godforsaken hero mission and only had 3 enemies left to kill, and now you have to start the whole thing over again. Alright, from the top then. I'll kill you, and all of you. And finally, after another 7 minutes, there we go, I freaking did it. Why didn't the next hero path stage unlock? I beat the hero mission, so where the heck is it? This has got to be a mistake. Or, oh no, I know what happened. Some higher power is angry with me! I personally am being punished because I skipped the Team Chaotix missions back in Sonic Heroes. Because now they've taken those god-awful mission ideas and made them the backbone of the entire game! And of course you can't just go into the level select, pick a level you've already played, complete a different goal, and continue from there. No! That would be silly! It only counts, it only sticks, it only matters when you start a whole new game and play from the very beginning. This is ridiculous! This is insulting. You can only play 6 out of the 22 stages on each playthrough, so to unlock them all, you're gonna have to play through the game over and over and over and over and... Oh, crap. I just figured out what they were trying to do. Hackneyed game journalists will tell you that Sonic struggled ever since he made the jump to 3D. While I can see why it might look that way if you don't actually care about the series and just want to push an easy narrative, Sonic Team has actually found 2 distinct ways to make Sonic work in 3D, both of which were seen as reasonably successful in their own time. So I believe the real conundrum this franchise has struggled with in modern times is finding ways to incentivize replayability in a time when players increasingly don't find replaying a game for its own sake to be compelling enough reason to stick with it. Trying to solve this problem is one reason, if not the biggest reason, the series keeps reinventing itself and falling flat on its face. To this point, Sonic Team had tried multiple gameplay styles to make the games last longer, a choice that was becoming something of a liability, as well as emblem missions for the completionists. Oh, I guess you also technically had the Chow Garden, if you like the characters but you're not actually good enough at video games to appreciate high-speed platformers. Sorry, the game's rubbing off on me, I'll stop trying to be edgy. The point is, Shadow's idea could have been the perfect solution to this replayability problem, keeping the gameplay focused around a single playstyle while making replays rewarding. Shadow's execution on this is so poor I didn't even realize what they were going for at first, but when it's done right, it's one of my absolute favorite ways to incentivize replayability, and it has been ever since I first experienced it way back in 1997. Right, here's the map screen. A single playthrough consists of 8 of these 16 stages. You always start with Corneria, and all roads lead to Venom, but what you do in each level determines how you'll get there. I'll give you an example. Right when it looks like you've beaten the boss of Sector X, he comes roaring back to life. Your wing frog Slippy charges in to attack, but, you know, he's Slippy, so he gets slam dunked onto another planet, and the next stage is a rescue mission to save him. However, the next time you play Sector X, you'll know you need to hurry, and you might manage to finish off the boss before Slippy can rush in. Then instead of going to the desert, you'll storm the enemy supply depot on Macbeth. Oh, but Sector X also has another hidden exit. If you shoot out these panels, you'll find a hidden warp, throwing you clear across the Lilat system and onto the most difficult path. If you went through this stage earlier in your playthrough, you would have met up with Fox's old pal Bill, and he'll show up again to help you find the warp. And that's just one level. This stuff applies throughout the whole game. Almost every stage has 2 or more ways to get through it, which lets the game keep surprising you with new stages and secrets, which gives you reason to keep replaying it, which means you'll inevitably get better at it. God, did I ever play the bejesus out of Star Fox 64! A lot of my all-time favorite games are like this, with a short campaign that offers a ton of possibilities. If my actions as a player can affect the game to that degree, I will spend a gargantuan amount of time replaying that game and testing those limits, even if it's a genre I might not otherwise be interested in. This is exactly the structure that Sonic Team was going for. That's why the level select doesn't let you unlock anything new. You're meant to replay the game from the beginning each time, trying out new things, unlocking new stages, and most importantly, getting better at it. But that only works if the game is fun, and if breaking through that skill ceiling is enjoyable. That mission structure needs to be designed for replayability, because if, say, nearly every mission is based around tedious scavenger hunts, and the game doesn't trust you to uncover anything on your own and just wants to tell you exactly what to do, then going through all of that once would be awful enough. Who would want to put themselves through all this crap again? So much of this falls back on level design. It never stops being an issue, and the mission structure isn't enough to justify some of these choices. Even more linear stages tend to fall apart. Literally in one case. Cosmic Fall is a dumpster fire tumbling through space, requiring you to just hold still while pieces of the Ark crumble around you. Still waiting, still waiting, still waiting. Ah, there's the next piece of the level. Thanks. Even when it's not literally broken, level structure is almost always tepid, repetitive, and under-designed. It's indicative of either a rushed development cycle that resorted to way too much padding and cut corners to get the game out the door, or it's indicative of how far Yuji Naka's Sonic Team had fallen in just 4 short years. Central City is an abominable example of the game falling apart under the weight of all this. For starters, it's a blatant reuse of the first stage's assets. Like, the appeal of a progression system like this, and the reason it would work so well for Sonic, is because they both rely on the variety of unique stages. But Sonic Team bit off more than they could chew, so here we are, back in Westopolis. Like most levels, the missions here can be boiled down to shoot all the things. And Central City has this non-linear, dare I say, esoteric level design that left me baffled. I can't navigate 3D space to save my life even in games where I have a map, so I was not having a good time here. To win the hero path, Knuckles wants you to destroy all 30 bombs strewn randomly around the city. If you fail, the whole city will explode. For the dark path, Black Doom wants you to detonate a giant bomb, which is nonsensically accomplished by blowing up a bunch of medium-sized bombs. Destroying them all somehow arms the giant one, and if you lose, the city doesn't blow up. Wait a minute, lose the hero mission and the city blows up. Lose the dark mission and the city doesn't blow up. When the narrative cohesion of the missions within a single level is breaking down like this, you might have a problem. But that's par for the course. Level missions have to bend over backwards for flimsy justification, like, oh no, Eggman built this casino out of rings, so collect 400 of them. I don't know though, I think Shadow's worst sin was bringing back these barrels. Ugh. At one point on the hero path, we learn that Shadow lacks any sense of self-preservation when he decides it would be a good idea to steal the Chaos Emerald that's powering the very ship he's standing on right now.
This is like taking candy from a baby, which is fine by me.
Wow. Yep. So much cooler than Sonic. But wait, this could actually be something really cool. The Emerald's energies, combined with the wailing alarm of the ship's warp core breach, trigger a flashback. But this is not your standard goofy SA2 style flashback, no. This is an entire level called Lost Impact, set aboard the Ark 50 years ago, and your partner character here is Maria. Seriously, this is so cool. The music is this nostalgic, bittersweet piece that reminds me of something. It's incredible to see the Ark back when it was still in service, and most of all, the chance to directly experience more of Shadow and Maria's friendship through gameplay could make their history, which is after all at the heart of Shadow's character, so much more meaningful. Okay, your mission this time is to destroy 35 artificial chaos?
Those liquid creatures are the experiment byproducts, based on a god of an ancient culture.
Oh, you know what? That's perfect. The game's going out of its way to fill in the details as to why these enemies look so much like chaos. Alright, this should be fun!
As I promised you, Maria, I will protect the Professor and the Ark.
I never should have done it. I never should have coveted that Sega Genesis for my 6th birthday. I mean, my life now would be different to the point of being unrecognizable, but at least I wouldn't be here. At least I wouldn't have had to play Lost Impact. This might seriously be the worst level I have ever played in this series. I mean, here I am, transporting from checkpoint to checkpoint. Do you see the issue here? The entire level is built out of nearly identical rooms, connected together by the slowest, most repetitive, most boring moving turret rides I've ever seen. Now, I did discover about half an hour in that I could hold down the A button to make them move faster, but apparently that's the one forking thing that the partner character, who basically only exists to tell you how to play the game, couldn't be bothered to fill me in on.
Mr. Yuji Naka is all right.
You sure about that? Maybe someone should check on him. I'd rather play a game that's brutally, unfairly challenging. I'd rather play a game lousy with bugs and glitches where you just fall through the floor and have to restart constantly. I would rather play Sonic 3D Blast, and oh yeah, that's what the music was reminding me of. What an appropriate song for a level where you scour cookie-cutter environments, just picking off enemies. At no point in this entire game did I ever feel like my skills or abilities were being challenged. The always forgiving ring system has never been more lenient. Being hit only makes you drop 10 rings, and they're so easy to pick up that even boss fights are dead simple to cheese. So the game owes its length not to challenges overcome by skill mastery, but to chores overcome by time investment. Through most of its playtime, Shadow gives you nothing interesting to do. Nearly everything that could have been good about it crumbles under the weight of that convoluted mess of a progression system. Nearly everything, right on down to the story. Of course, the problem there is which story are we even talking about, because that also changes depending on what path you take. The whole reason this game needed to happen was to answer the mysteries that were raised back in Heroes. How did Shadow wind up here? Why does he have amnesia? Is this even the original Shadow? And if it is, how did he survive this? And no, a Sonic X episode that caulked over that plot hole 2.5 years later does not justify Sonic Adventure 2's complete lack of an explanation. Metatextually, Shadow has amnesia, so we'll have a convenient excuse to explore his backstory, and so that he can believe things about himself even if they aren't congruent with what we already know about him. And that's a problem, because even though he doesn't know who or what he is, We do. Sonic Adventure 2 already provided a complete origin story and character arc for Shadow the Hedgehog. We know he was created by Gerald Robotnik, the promise he made to his only friend, and the effect that promise and her death had on him. To get around all that in the most uninspired manner imaginable, Heroes had to place that seed of doubt that this might not even be the real Shadow. With that set up in place, this game's story is free to go in whatever ridiculous direction you decide to take it. And oh, does it ever need to stretch itself far? Because you see all those bubbles at the end of the progression map? Do you know what those are? Endings. Maybe Shadow decides to be heroic and virtuous despite not remembering who he is. Amnesia or not, it's just in his nature to be good. Except maybe it isn't. Maybe he trusts Black Doom implicitly for absolutely no reason and blindly goes along with whatever he says. Or maybe he sees this shadow android army mass-produced by Eggman and decides that he's one of the androids too. But come on, he's definitely the real Shadow. Of course he is. Look at these low-poly pretenders. But oh well, he's still gonna team up with Omega and take the Empire for himself. And he completes that mission by murdering Eggman.
Goodbye, Doctor.
I mean, if you don't like that, can you really call yourself a Sonic fan? Or maybe Shadow ties his whole identity to the space colony Ark, decides this place is sacred to him, and makes that his purpose. There are worse things than being married to a spaceship. Or maybe it was aliens! Yeah, no, really, that's it. It was aliens. But all these forced conundrums and tacked-on plot elements seem all the more strange when Shadow could have provided an explanation for the question that we fans were asking from the day that we first saw this screenshot. The mystery that Sonic Adventure 2 so conspicuously left hanging. Why is Shadow so similar to Sonic?
Sonic, I think I've discovered what the ultimate life form is. It might be you.
I know it was probably the result of a bad translation, but still. The implications of that line blew my freaking mind when I was 13. But I guess that wasn't the story Sonic Team wanted to tell. In real talk, that ship had sailed anyway. Instead, Heroes was forced to invent all new questions, and after almost 2 years of build-up, here's the payoff. Is this the real Shadow? Yes, but he doesn't always know that. Why does he have amnesia? We don't know! How did he survive? Okay. See, apparently everyone thought that Shadow died, but really Eggman rescued him with one of his robots. However, the game will only ever actually tell you that in a single line of dialogue that you'll only hear if you spend an insane amount of time fighting the final boss, and since you would never actually hear this unless you were trying to, in conclusion, it doesn't matter. None of these questions were raised in the service of enriching Shadow's backstory or doing something interesting with his character. They were plot conveniences that needed to happen so Sonic Team could tell a choose-your-own-adventure plot about a character who had already died and whose story had already been told. So of course the answers aren't going to be satisfying, but even if they were, even if, against all odds, Sonic Team had somehow stuck the landing here, the story would still lack any sort of cohesion for the same reason everything else in the game does. The progression system. Let me give you an example. This is a new character, Commander... No, that's his name. Alright then. My first time through the game, he had this big introductory cutscene where he swore that he'd take revenge on the Hedgehog for some unspoken reason. And then he never showed up again. My second time through, I sat through that same scene, and then, once again, Commander Nobody disappeared for the rest of the game. My third time through, many long and arduous stages in, he finally got a second scene. And in fact, this time he served as the final boss. And he said this.
This is for my family and for Maria. Settle this with my own hands.
What? Who are you? How do you know Maria? Why do you hate Shadow? What is going on? Now those questions do have answers, but unfortunately I went this way and the cutscene explaining this guy's backstory is down here. And do you see the problem yet? The point, I guess, is that you'll uncover another piece of the answer with each playthrough. But should you really weave a complex, intricate narrative when the plot might just do a 180 based on the whims of the player? I mean, most of the time Shadow just has to teleport wherever the next level is supposed to be.
What? Where am I?
It kinda looks like Regal Ruin. Oh, if only we could go back in time. Characters pop in and out of the story with literally no explanation. Story elements as critical as the Black Comet itself appear literally right before they're needed. Like, hey Shadow, do you think that comet outside the window might be related to your origin? And what are the odds? It is! On more than one occasion, I had to fight a character I had just helped simply because the game decreed there must be a boss battle here and only had one to give me. I'm also not so sure if tying your character's moral alignment to a Star Foxian progression structure was even a good idea. Because when morality is done right in games, a big part of the fun is seeing how your actions as a player affect and change the world around you. Allies on one path become enemies on another, and it's fascinating to see the same places from such different perspectives. But you can never do that in Shadow, because your moral choices completely change both the plot and your path through the game. And no matter what you do, nobody seems to react anyway. You can be as evil, wicked, and ruthless as you want. Death to all who oppose you! And heroic characters just never comment on it! They'll still show up in the last level, expecting Shadow to do the right thing, even though he never has. Well, I said you can be evil and ruthless, but mostly Shadow's just following orders without question. And honestly, that makes the Dark Path the most narratively cohesive option. If you can accept that Shadow trusts Black Doom implicitly just because, then beyond that, the story doesn't have to justify why convenient plot threads spring up right when they need to. Shadow's just doing what he's told. Black Doom's plan to collect the emeralds and use them to power the Ark's Eclipse cannon is a sensible follow-up to Sonic Adventure 2's ending, although I can't believe humanity just left a weapon like that up there. Hopefully they at least cleaned it. But seriously, this scene is actually pretty chilling and effective, and it leads directly to the game's darkest ending. But remember, I could have decided Shadow had a change of heart at the last second, meaning that shortly after making Central City look a whole lot more like Genocide City, Shadow would have redeemed himself by helping Rouge collect a Chaos Emerald. And if I had done that, I'd have fought a different final boss and gotten a completely different outcome. Of course, endings, like everything else, are locked to a single playthrough. I can't just pick the stage from here and get that ending. I would have to start from Westopolis again, claw my way back here again, and take the other option. And it's only by unlocking each and every one of those 10 endings, only by playing through this game at least 10 times, with the majority of that playtime being slight variations on things that you would have already done, it's only then that you can unlock the last story. I'm not sure what's worse. Sonic Heroes making you play through the game 4 times just to see the end, or Shadow expecting you to do it 10 times. And time progression to the same kind of awful time-wasting crap as the Team Chaotix missions. And being written like what marketing execs in 2005 thought would sound cool to an 8-year-old. And, no, you know what, core gameplay overall, Heroes is still the worst game. But because of this approach, Shadow regularly blasts open such wide plot holes, even I can see them. And I don't even care! Back in 2001, it was still kind of acceptable for your game's script to be an obvious rushed job of a Japanese translation, but 4 years later, it had gotten no better. And now the entire voice cast has been replaced with the cast of a literal 4Kids anime dub. An anime dub where the characters have to say things like this.
I'm going to destroy this damn planet.
The black creatures will feel their own bloody hell.
You're going straight to hell.
Damn, they got away.
If you know this series, you know that outside of exceptional circumstances, I prefer to avoid bad language. This is not because I'm some kind of paragon of virtue. I can be as colorful as anyone else outside of these videos, but I abstain here because, for one, I'd like my videos about family-friendly games to be family-friendly themselves, but more importantly, I think cussing in gaming analysis videos is kind of overplayed, and that overuse diminishes the impact those powerful words should carry. Shadow really is a perfect example of this. In its effort to attract the mature, discerning demographic of everyone 10 and up, the game seeds its dialogue with what few bad words they can get away with, and delivers them with all the grace, nuance, and restraint of, well, a 10-year-old boy. When I was a 16-year-old boy, I refused to participate in the miserable sad sack phenomenon that was going on at the time. But now, as a 31-year-old man-child playing a game made for edgelord preteens, I suppose, just this once, I'll allow myself to follow their example.
Welcome to the next level.
How dare you? How dare you reference a time like that in a depressing, deplorable game like this?
Damn this game straight to hell.
I'm never doing this crap again. Speaking of things I'm never doing again, it's time to end this. In the end, Black Doom swipes the Chaos Emeralds, uses them to warp the Black Comet into the Earth's atmosphere, the entire cast shows up to confront him, and...
Yeah, let's do this! I'll crush that cosmic rock ball!
Knuckles, what's wrong?
In a moment, total paralysis will hit your nervous system. Eat and devour these savory dishes.
I'm at a loss for words. And then Shadow, who has killed countless parasites throughout the game, including that one right there, he just walks off and leaves the rest of the cast to be devoured. Wow, what a hero! What gripping drama and deep character development! Man, why can't Sonic stories be like this again? The final stage is called The Last Way, and if that name wasn't enough of a clue that Sonic Team had stretched themselves too far, the level is, no joke, just a hard mode mashup of previous stages that were set on the Black Comet. Here at the 11th hour, Shadow has finally abandoned its morality missions. This time there's only one goal, and that goal is simple. Get to Black Doom and kick his ass! What, I'm family friendly. I'm not for kids. I'm not for kids, do you hear me, YouTube? When Shadow gets there, Black Doom reveals that actually I was involved in the plot the whole time! Professor Gerald gave his creation life via the blood of Black Doom, and in return, Gerald promised Shadow would give Black Doom the Chaos Emeralds when the comet returned in 50 years. Meanwhile, Team Chaotix is hanging out right where you'd expect them to be, and they just happen to accidentally broadcast one of Gerald's VHS tapes to everyone on the comet. Whoopsie doodle. This gives us basically the same thing we got in SA2, a last-minute Gerald Robotnik exposition dump that reveals the truth about Shadow's past. Except this time, it's delivered in a wacky over-the-top parody of an old man voice.
In 50 years, the Black Comet will return. They plan to harness its powers to destroy this planet. The only way to stop them was to develop a way to use the very power they intended to use against them.
That's it! It's brilliant!
Turns out, Gerald saw that he made a mistake in trusting Black Doom, and built the Eclipse Cannon for the express purpose of blowing that comet, Black Doom's home, to pieces. I actually really like that. It takes a hanging thread from Adventure 2's plot, the Eclipse Cannon, and gives it a better reason to exist. Shadow grabs the emeralds and transforms, backed with an admittedly sweet mashup of this game's theme with Live and Learn, then takes the fight to Black Doom. This is it! The finale has arrived! You're going down, Devil Doom! Oh, and meanwhile Shadow's friends have all been covered in Agent Black and are being devoured, but don't worry! They make it to safety off-screen. No they don't! Yes they do! Victorious at last, Shadow Chaos controls the comet into the path of the Ark, then decimates it with the Eclipse Cannon. He vows to put his past behind him. Never again will he be anyone's puppet.
Goodbye forever, Shadow the Hedgehog.
Yeah, it's a pretty good ending. Is it worth all the time it takes to get here? No. But I do appreciate what it reveals about Gerald, and despite the inane, pointless mystery tour he went through to get here, I think it leaves Shadow's character in the best place it possibly could. But what about the real stars of the game?
Let's work to ensure peace and prosperity for a brighter future. What do you say, Commander?
Excellent idea, Mr. President.
Come on, Sega. The fans demand it. Over the course of replaying these horrible, repetitive levels over and over and over again, things like the ridiculous JPEG fire on the title screen and the gunshot sounds on the menu stopped being so funny. There are too many levels, too many branching paths, way too many endings, and not enough variety to make completing the game more than once even remotely appealing. And yet, that first time I completed it, I didn't do any of those missions. I just ran through it. And when I was done, this is what I wrote. You know, that was surprisingly not bad. It was a little clunky, sure, but I'm glad I played it. Westopolis is awfully rough, but the stuff after that isn't as painful, and one level in particular really stood out. As a whole, I never felt bored or frustrated. The story and dialogue were fun in that so-bad-it's-good way that I really enjoy, and best of all, it didn't take too long to play through. But from here on, I know I'm going to be playing the missions. and I've already seen what that's going to entail. I'm afraid this, right now, is probably the most I will ever like this game. Yeah, I was right. And that sucks, because there really are some bright spots in here. As a Sonic fan, there are things that I like about it. Now, most of these levels are awful. Most of the time, no matter how you play it, Shadow doesn't seem like it's supposed to be fun. But visually, man, at least when the stages can get away from pseudo-realism, Sonic Team still knew how to flex those creative muscles. Levels like Digital Circuit look phenomenal, pulling off that cyber aesthetic from the Advanced series in 3D. It's also a great touch how recurring elements like springs have unique designs that are themed around the archetype of the stage they're in. And at least on a level-to-level basis, Shadow does have a respectable amount of variety. This series has always thrived on making every zone distinct from the others, and Shadow generally does a good job, at least, of throwing new things at you. It is still awesome to see a new angle on familiar locations from Sonic Adventure 2. This is one of the only times I can think of where the Sonic series did Metroid-style fan service, where there's a real purpose to seeing these nostalgic locales again. And then, every once in a while, you'll come across a level like Sky Troops, where the stage design really isn't obfuscated by mission structure, where the music is a perfect fit for where we are in the game and in the story, where the level gimmicks are unique and fun to control, where you get a little glimpse of what Shadow the Hedgehog might have been, if only Sonic Team had a clearer vision of what exactly they were trying to accomplish here. Looking at stuff like this, it's so easy to imagine how this could have been different. First things first, even if you had infinite time and no budget constraints, committing to this many stages, all of which needed to have morality choices, would have always been flirting with disaster. A more focused game that had, say, 12 stages instead of 22, and 3 or 4 endings instead of 10, could have put that time into quality instead of quantity, and made for a game that would be worth playing again. Maybe midway through Westopolis. Once you've had a chance to get acclimated to the controls, Sonic could show up.
We've got to protect the Chaos Emerald at the heart of the city. Last one there's a rotten Eggman.
If you can get to the goal within a certain time, Sonic's impressed, and that leads to the hero path. If you're too slow, Shadow sulks off like a miserable emo loner, and that's the neutral path. But maybe the cutscene beforehand has Black Doom imploring Shadow to incapacitate Sonic instead. If you find a way to do that, which would be something hinted at in the level design and not told to you explicitly, that's the dark path. Sonic Team could still do inspired work, but this was the adventure era. What you see is what you get. An overabundance of ambition, spoiled by a lack of focus. And in this case, what we got was a tedious, repetitive game that's mildly frustrating sometimes, and an absolute chore most of the time. Those bright spots are there, but they're way too few and way too far between. This season has followed the downfall of the Sonic franchise. The path it took, over the course of just a few years, from its place as a revered icon of the gaming industry to its most infamous laughingstock. Shadow the Hedgehog, in my view, is the poster child of that process, leaning so hard into surface-level depictions of maturity, as if the series could no longer be relevant without them, came across as nakedly pandering and insecure. That's why most old-school fans feel the way we do about this character. He's emblematic of everything that defined this period of ambition, excess, and ruin, reminding us of a time when the series that we loved lost its way. The best thing we could do was laugh about it. And don't get me wrong, I do love laughing about it, but I see the tragedy at the heart of it all. A Sonic game with an open-ended design, where your actions in a level determine which path you'll take, bringing you through a short, fun campaign with a ton of replayability and level variety. That, in concept, sounds like the best solution to Sonic's biggest problem that I've ever seen. And if they had pulled it off and solved that problem right then and there, that could have been Shadow's legacy. But Sonic Team screwed up the execution in their first attempt, and so, like everything else about the adventure era, because the execution failed, it was decided the concept itself must be flawed. And flawed as it was, the progression system isn't Shadow's legacy. This is.
Where's that damn fourth Chaos Emerald?
Yeah, okay. It's still pretty funny. But I like this one even more.
You know that Eggman fella pretty well, don't ya? Well, we need your help to hack into his computer. Don't ask why.
Well, what a coincidence. I'd like to know what the good old doctor's up to as well.
So if you ever need to hack a computer, just use a karate chop. It'll open a portal to the internet that you can travel through. And while you're in there, remember this. YouTube basically doesn't think this channel is any good unless you engage with it, so if you would, please do like the video. And hey, next season, what do you say I do something besides Sonic, huh? This double-length season took way longer than I meant for it to, but I hope you all have enjoyed it. Thank you to Definitive Dubs for providing the voice of Shadow, to Penny Parker for providing the voice of Sonic, and thank you so much for watching. Until next time,
You keep damn geeking. I'll keep damn critiquing.